Good evening and welcome to this year's Kristallnacht Commemoration. Our community was founded on and is sustained by the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We acknowledge and give thanks to the elders and traditional owners of the lands from which we all join this commemoration. We acknowledge the leaders, past, present and emerging, who have cared for this land for thousands of years. We offer respect to the First Peoples who live now in the community and whose presence and cultures are vital to our nation. May we walk with care on this land that sustains their spirit and which has provided a home for our Jewish community. Kristallnacht, or the Night of Broken Glass, was a pogrom against Jews throughout Nazi Germany and Austria on the 9th to 10th of November 1938. German authorities stood by and looked on without intervening as 267 synagogues were destroyed. Over 7,000 Jewish businesses were damaged or ruined, and 30,000 Jewish men were arrested and sent to concentration camps. The name Kristallnacht comes from the broken glass from Jewish-owned stores, buildings and synagogues, which littered the streets after being ransacked and set alight. Tonight, I encourage you to listen and learn, and keep the stories of the Holocaust alive for future generations. Remembrance of this night is unfortunately no guarantee that never again means never again. Despite the high awareness of the Holocaust, anti-Semitism and anti-Jewish hostility is on the rise again today. But not only anti-Semitism, so too is xenophobia, bigotry and prejudice. At a time of rising anti-Semitism and many other hate crimes, we are obligated to keep alive the memories passed on to us and to share them with others as a warning that what happened could happen again. It is an obligation that we recognise where racial hatred can lead.
As we commemorate Kristallnacht, we remember the beginning of the darkest period of human history, where anti-Semitism reached the level of which we never want to see again. Can I say to the Australian Jewish community, the Jewish community in New South Wales, that we stand together with you in remembering that horrible night and what it represents. And we stand with you in remembering every single victim, every single Jew who experienced the worst in humanity. None of us ever want to see that again, which is why we must remain vigilant. Anti-Semitism, racism of any type must and should be condemned, because words turn into action, turn into horror. Thank you for your contribution to the world. Thank you for your contribution to New South Wales. We join with you in sharing your sorrow and your grief. And I want to appreciate the fact that this year we come to recognise this evening in a different way. And I want to thank the community for your understanding in relation to COVID and what that represents as well. But can I express on this occasion my deepest empathy and thoughts with all of you who remember those dark times in human history, and also consider all of you who lost loved ones during that dark episode.
The Kristallnacht made me realize that the urgency that I had to leave Germany because we were no longer wanted and our life was not safe anymore. I was living in Erfurt and I started learning because we thought we knew in the Hitler period that we have to learn a trade for emigrating from most Jews, usually academics or professional. So I was interested to become a mechanic.
My name is Draco. I was born in a city called Leipzig in Germany. I was from a very large family. We lived in a beautiful big house. in 1933. I was in a school called Leibniz Gymnasium, a wonderful school, 2,900 pupils, one Jew, Eddie, and I was kicked out.
At the turn of the century, my maternal grandfather came from Krakow in Poland to Germany with his first baby, my mother, because he wanted to raise his family in a civilized society.
And I made the biggest mistake of my young life. I wanted to surprise my parents. I go home. On the 9th of November, I didn't tell my parents on the phone that I'm coming home. I wanted to surprise them. For me, it was important to see again my parents. You have no idea what that means to be alone in a surrounding of Nazis, enemies in my country.
It was very quiet in the street. When I got to school, the doors were open, the books were in the street, and there was nobody there. And I couldn't make it out. I was very puzzled and frightened. So I turned around and very gingerly, without running or showing my internal panic, I went back home and I told them what I'd found at school, and my father immediately gathered us in the living room and said, "We have to leave here. We're going to go to the Polish consulate to take cover, and if we are caught in any way, any of us or all of us, we're not denying that we're Jewish. We're not going to pretend in any way we're proud of what we are." And I thought, well, if he can trust me, I'm prepared to die with the others.
On November the 9th, in the middle of the night, somebody knocked at the door. They were looking for my father, and my father was not at home. When they came to my home, they took me instead.
At 5 o'clock on the 10th of November, my nightmare starts. 10 of the Nazis broke in the door of our house, and I swear to you, they bashed me to pieces. I said, "Eddie, this is your last day." My pyjama was full of blood, and one took out his bayonet, cut off my left sleeve of my pyjama, and started to engrave a swastika in my left arm. When the blood was running down on my arm and my little dog saw the blood, he jumped on him. I don't know if he bit him or he just scared him. He let me go, put the bayonet on his rifle, and killed my dog, shouting, "Ein Judenhund."
And my mother took my hand and kept walking, and then we saw a taxi being overturned with the wheels in the air, and they were dragging an old man out of it with a beard and beating him with their boots. And my mother said, "Just keep walking," and we kept walking, and then there was a smell of smoke, and we were passing the synagogue and it was on fire, and we kept walking, and the crowd was getting thicker and thicker, and the smoke was terrifying. And finally we came to the worst crowd of all, and they were surrounding the Polish consulate. And as the gate closed behind me, I fainted.
When we got to Buchenwald, they did say we're going to be, in an hour you don't live anymore. And when we arrived there, it was nighttime, and the morning roll was, where all the prisoners were, was all floodlit. It looked like an execution scene. And that's when I realized, I think that's it. But I did not feel, I didn't cry, or my mind just went blank.
And in Buchenwald, it was only men. And some mornings they opened the gates, and maybe 200, 300 would go out, and when they are 50 or 60 meters, they shot them in the back.
My mother wouldn't leave until we were safe. And also, she wanted to stay behind in case my father came out of concentration camp again and needed her. So she sacrificed herself for us all, which has been a great guilt for me that I had to do something worthwhile with my life to justify her.
When the number was put on my arm later on, I was condemned to die a slow death. And all the survivors, I wished I could help every survivor to live the life like I live, happy despite that we have suffered. We have to teach the children and the adults that we have to look after the people next to us and far beyond. It is important to learn from the past. So maybe, I say maybe, we can change the future.
Usually a Holocaust survivor would be here in person to light this memorial candle. Because of the circumstances, I've been given the honor to light this candle on their behalf this evening. Holocaust survivors have been the heart and soul of the Sydney Jewish Museum since its inception 28 years ago. During this time, they have shared their testimony and their memories with hundreds of thousands of students and adults to ensure that the Holocaust and those murdered are never ever forgotten. I light this candle on behalf of all Holocaust survivors in honor and memory of their families who perished, and in memory of the millions who were murdered during the Shoah.
כל מלא רחמים שוכן במרומים המצא מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים לנשמות 6 מיליוני אחינו בני ישראל שנהרגו ושנשחטו ושנשרפו ושנטבעו ושנקברו חיים על ידי הנאצים ועוזריהם יימח שמם ומסרו נפשם על קידוש השם בעבור שאנו מתפללים לעולי משפטם ולעולי נשמתם לכן בעל הרחמים יסתירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתם בגן עדן תהא מנוחתם אדוני הוא נחלתם וינוחו בשלום על משכבם ונאמר אמן. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא דברה חירותי והמליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך לעולם עולמי עלמיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי דקודשה בריחו, לעילם מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דאמירן בעמה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן.
Our In Conversation tonight will be hosted by Sydney-based mediator, facilitator and judicial educator Joanna Kolowski. Joanna runs a management consultancy, has been on a range of boards and advisory councils, and has had a lifelong commitment to social justice and human rights. Joanna's mother, Rose Charlotte Breutmann, was born in Hanover, Germany, in 1913. Joanna recalls her mother's experience of Kristallnacht. November 9 was the worst moment in our mother's life. Of everything she experienced, this night was always with her. It was the night she heard and saw the synagogue being destroyed. Nazi paramilitary forces burned then dynamited the Hanover synagogue on 9th of November 1938, Kristallnacht, reducing it to rubble. To add insult to injury, Nazi authorities presented the chief rabbi with a bill for the synagogue's demolition and cleanup costs. Following Kristallnacht, Joanna's mother Rose and her family went into hiding, and for good reason. Rose's first cousin, Herschel Greenspan, was the person who assassinated German diplomat Ernst von Rath in Paris, the pretext used by the Nazis to launch Kristallnacht. Our guest speaker tonight is Dr Edith Eger, psychologist, public speaker, acclaimed author and Holocaust survivor. Born in Hungary, Edith was just 16 when she and her family were sent to Auschwitz in 1944. Having been moved to Austria with other prisoners towards the end of the war, in May 1945 a young American soldier noticed her hand moving slightly amongst a number of dead bodies and quickly summoned medical help, bringing her back from the brink of death. After the war, Edith moved to Czechoslovakia and married Bella before moving to the United States in 1949. They had 3 children together. Dr. Eger is a renowned author of The Choice, a testament to resilience inspired by her own story of survival, and The Gift, a practical guide to healing. Even in her 90s, Dr. Eger maintains a busy clinical practice in California, specializing in post-traumatic stress, and holds a faculty appointment at the University of California, San Diego. Dr. Eger has an Australian connection too. Her late sister, Clara Corda, lived in Sydney and was one of our city's most accomplished violinists. Edith still has family living in Sydney, including her niece Jeanette, who is, believe it or not, a psychologist. Oprah Winfrey says of Dr. Eger, "I'll be forever changed by her story." We hope you too will be inspired by hearing Dr. Eger tonight. On behalf of the New South Wales Jewish Board of Deputies and its Holocaust Remembrance Committee, please welcome Joanna Kolofsky and Dr. Edith Eger.
Good evening. Tonight we have the great privilege of having with us Dr. Edith Eger. Dr. Eger has generously agreed to give our community this interview on this night of all nights, Kristallnacht. A warm welcome to you from Sydney, Dr. Eger.
Hello, shalom.
What, Dr. Eger, is the importance of commemoration and memorialization? And why do we feel this deep need to commemorate such a terrible event?
I think it's very important for me to tell you that unfortunately we have genocide as we speak, but never in the history of mankind such a scientific and systematic annihilation of people existed. And one of the most beautiful gifts of God is the gift of memory. I owe it to my parents. As long as I live, I'm going to go wherever I show up, especially in the military, especially in churches, to let people know what happens when good people do bad things. I think it's very important for us to tell our children that they are the future. They are the ambassadors. I work with young people. I'm totally invested, and I want to be a good role model to them, that they stay in school because the best power is brain power. You see, at 93, I don't pathologize so much. I'm just saying, when you get up in the morning, do you want to feel good or bad? To make it simple, because you're the one who created the environment. So are you going to live in the present? Then you can realize there is one thing we cannot change, is the past. And yet we could have died, because it's easier to die than to live. I was very suicidal after I was liberated, after I was in the hospital, after I was put in a bed and I was tied down because I could hardly breathe. Yeah. And I just know that my parents are ever gonna come back. So the reality hit me, and I realized my parents are not coming back.
And
But
that's
thank
when
God.
that's when you made this choice, isn't it? You started to step into this choice.
Exactly. That living life to the fullest, every moment is precious. We don't seem to appreciate sometimes what we have until we lose it. So we stick to the familiar because the devil you know is better
Yes,
than the
that's
devil
right.
you don't know.
And the devil, you
But
know, sits more heavily on your shoulder, I think.
there you go. And I want you to see that change is synonymous with growth.
I'm thinking as you speak about how many of us are second generation and we carry some of the guilt of our parents.
Yes.
How on earth do people in communities like ours, the Jewish community in Sydney, for example, how do we overcome that? Can we do something as a group?
I don't know that word overcome. All I can tell you that I will never forget. I will never overcome. I came to terms with it. I call it my cherished wound because part of me was left in Auschwitz. Not the better part, not the bigger part. I think it's very important not to think about overcoming because I am reminded almost every day.
Was the study of going back to school and studying and becoming a psychologist, was that part of the opening of the chrysalis for you?
I tell you the biggest thing that happened. I began to work with PTSD. I was one of the professionals who actually coined that word. So I had two paraplegics with the same symptomatology, with the same diagnosis, the same prognosis, and one of them was chronically angry, blaming everything, everyone, God, country. Conversely, the other one said to me, "You know, Doc, I'm sitting in a wheelchair, and I'm so grateful that God allows me to look at my children closer and I can see the flowers." And I had a white coat and it said Dr. Eger, Department of Psychiatry. And I felt like I was the biggest phony. And that's when I decided that I could not take them further than I have gone myself. And I decided to go back to Auschwitz. That was a turning point for me. And that's the work I do today. You revisit the places, you relive that experience, but you don't get stuck in there. You go through the valley of the shadow of death. Okay, but you don't camp there or set up household there. I'm not a victim. I was victimized. It's not my identity. It's what was done to me.
You make a very strong distinction between the question why and the question what next, because what next is a very different question. Could you tell us a little more about that?
Well, the present is the only thing I can change. The past is gone and the future is not yet. So you must stop two things, guilt and worry. Because if you are guilty, all you have to tell yourself, because my parents had tickets to come to America, and I'm sure I could have said, if I knew then what I know now, I would have done things very, very differently. But at the time, I did the best I could that was humanly possible with the information. So please don't live in the past. The question is, of course, not why me, but what now? And I like people to really look at me as someone that maybe sits on my shoulder, but they can see further than I do. So I like to be a mentor, but I'm not a guru. I don't have any answers, but I will tell you that Auschwitz was an opportunity to discover my inner resources and learn how to respond rather than react.
Dr. Eger, were you surprised, were you yourself surprised by the depth and power of your own resourcefulness?
Exactly. I call it a discovery, not recovery, because I was 16 and I was in love, and my boyfriend told me I have beautiful eyes and beautiful hands, and all I could think of that if I survive today, then tomorrow I'm gonna see my boyfriend. You know, we had plans to go to Palestine. We were very strong Zionists. We belonged to the Betar. We were gonna go and fight. Uh, we weren't so peaceful either. And, but we had this tremendous commitment that we can make a difference. And I think that is why I decided that maybe God has given me to practice my calling. It's not the psychology at all. It's about your spiritual, hopefully, that you discovered in a place like Auschwitz.
You call your particular brand of therapy, you say if you had to name it, you'd call it choice therapy. And of course, your first book was called The Choice. What are those choices that we can make in communities of Jews and others who've suffered? What are those choices we can make to bring that to some different end?
I think it's important to study stress. Hans Selye said that anything stressful that comes to us, we have two automatic responses, either fight or flee. In Auschwitz, that did not work at all, because if you touched the guards, you were shot right away, right in front of me. If I would have touched the barbed wire, I would have been electrocuted. And yes, I saw the blue bodies. So that's why I'm saying fight or flee does not work, but how to stay in a situation and develop a way for you to see that somehow, no matter what happens, I cannot control whether they're going to put me in a gas chamber. We didn't know whether I took a shower, whether gas is going to come out or water. We didn't know that at all. But I knew that I was in a situation that I could never allow the enemy to touch my spirit. I said to myself, yes, I am, yes, I can, yes, I will. And I did it. Yes. I made it. You are your encourager. You are, yes, I am. You are the best encourager for you, and find hope in hopelessness. Never, ever give up. Never, ever give up, because everything in life is an opportunity for discovery, and the discovery is to be a Jew who looks at life from inside out.
I now have to ask you about that wonderful line from your book, "You can't heal what you can't feel."
My daughter calls it Judaism, and that's one of them. There is no letting go until you go through the rage. Don't run from it. Face it, and then see to it how long you're going to hold on to it.
Yeah, that many Jews who suffered as you did carried the shame of those events rather than assigning them elsewhere.
The shame is awful. When a woman comes to me and tells me that she was sexually abused, but she doesn't want to tell me because I was in Auschwitz, and I tell her, I knew the enemy, you didn't. So we must not compare. Suffering is feelings, and the more you suffer, the stronger you become.
You say that there's no hierarchy of suffering. Another one of your wonderful lines. You say there's no hierarchy of suffering. There's no competition here.
Life is about suffering, and the suffering is a feeling. Otherwise, we just go through without. So it's good to feel the feelings as long as you don't get stuck in it and not get into the bad guys and the good guys and the us and them mentality. We are human. We're limited. I am not limitless. I am very limited. I know that I can only do so much now in terms of dancing. I still love to go dancing, and I still like the boogie woogie. But believe me, I don't turn around so many times, and I can still throw my feet up, but it's kind of halfway. So sometimes it takes a lot of courage just to be average.
Late in life, you wrote these two extraordinarily powerful books. What started you writing?
Well, for many years, people asked me to write, and I automatically said, I have nothing to say. But then one day, Philip Zimbardo from Stanford, I lectured quite a bit there, told me that the survivors who are famous are all men. And I have to be the female voice of Viktor Frankl. And that's how the choice started when I met Viktor Frankl and read Man's Search for Meaning. And for every page, I wanted to write 10 more pages. And I had a lot to say. So I'm very grateful to Viktor Frankl. In Auschwitz, he was in his 30s. He was a medical doctor. And I was a 16-year-old in love. And yet, we both used the same thing because we both checked out while they were beating us. He said he closed his eyes and imagined lecturing at the Viennese lecture hall about the psychology of the concentration camp. And I said, when I danced for Dr. Mengele, I too closed my eyes. And the music was Tchaikovsky. And I was dancing the Romeo and Juliet at the Budapest Opera House. So when I was in Sydney, my sister put me in the lodge of the Queen to watch the ballet of Romeo and Juliet. Yeah. And so I have lovely, lovely memories.
Well, Sydney's very sad that you can't be with us in person, because if you were, we would ask you to do your signature high kick.
Okay, you want to see it? I'll do it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I loved being here. It was a privilege to be with you. Thank you so much for your time and your joy.
Thank you and shalom.
Shalom, good night.
Viktor Frankl is often cited as an oracle on the Holocaust, not on its history, not on the unfathomable bigotry which underpinned it, nor on the grotesque rationale which motivated it, but on such issues as freedom of choice, emotional intelligence, human psychology, and the notion that is encapsulated in the title of his slender but seminal work, Man's Search for Meaning. Between stimulus and response, he wrote, there is a space, and in that space is our power to choose our response. That space, ladies and gentlemen, is what we are confronted with this evening. Increasingly, we are called on to combat the spectre of anti-Semitism. Exponentially, we measure the spike in expressions of bigotry on social media, in the classroom, on campus, in the workplace, in our daily lives. And on each occasion, there is a space between the stimulus, being the act of anti-Semitism, and how we respond. Every one of us has the opportunity to fill that space. Every one of us has the obligation to become an agent who helps bridge the gap from memory to history on behalf of the New South Wales Jewish Board of Deputies. I conclude tonight's commemoration by circling back to the message which we heard from our inspirational keynote speaker, Edith Eger, whom we thank for being with us tonight. A message which says that we have choice, all of us, every day on every issue. That is our power. Let us utilize it for the benefit of our community, for the benefit of our children, for the benefit of our grandchildren and succeeding generations. Thank you for your participation, and I wish you all a very good evening.